everybody. Thanks for joining us for our webinar this afternoon, where we're going to be looking at ADHD, autism, and taking part in sport. We've got some guests joining us this afternoon as well. From the National Children's Bureau, we've got Hope Capurro joining us with some young people that she's working with, Troy and B, who she'll tell us a little bit more about in a second. Hey, just to give you a little bit of an idea around what we're going to cover today, I'm going to hand over in a second to Hope, and they're going to talk to us about young people's experience of neurodiversity and taking part in sport. And then we're going to look at some of the safeguarding considerations when you are working with neurodiverse young people in sport, and then answer any questions that you may have on this subject. So I'm just going to hand over to Hope now, who's going to hopefully be able to introduce Troy and B a little more.
Hi, thank you. So I am one of the programme managers in the participation team at National Children's Bureau and Council for Disabled Children. You'll be pleased to know that I'm going to be doing minimal talking, and it's going to be mostly the young people. So we have the lovely Troy, who joins us from our advisory group that it makes up. We've got the Young NCB Advisory Group, who advise our work that we do as the NCB part of the organisation. And then we have lovely B, who's with us from one of our research advisory groups. So the focus of that is slightly different, but both young people who work with us quite regularly and are here to share their perspectives. So if Troy and B, you are comfortable putting your cameras on, now's the time to do it. But if you would prefer to keep your cameras off, that is also absolutely fine. And then I've got the questions up and ready. So if you're ready, unless there's anything else that you wanted to say about yourselves before we begin, I'll give you a chance just in case. You're all good, Troy? Perfect. And B, anything you wanted to add that I didn't say? No, perfect. Okay, well, we'll get started in that case. So the first question was, what sport do you do and why do you enjoy it? So shall we start with you, Troy?
I do swimming because it allows me to be myself and makes me get up and be healthy and really motivates me in pushing myself and helps my mental health.
Fantastic. And you said that it allows you to be yourself. What do you mean by that?
It allows me to express myself in many different ways, and it allows me to be graceful and having fun, and also not thinking about everything else that's going on in the world and in life.
Perfect. Thank you, Troy. And B, what sport do you do and why do you enjoy it?
I do horse riding and I enjoy it because it means that I not only get to spend lots of time with horses outside, but also I get to spend a lot of time with lots of different people because it is such a wide and diverse sport.
And you say it's a diverse sport. Do you mean the people or the activities?
So both the people and the activities are diverse. So for example, although I'm not part of it, there's the option to be part of the Riding for the Disabled Association, which means that it's made a lot more accessible for people with all sorts of disabilities. Because I don't really do much outside of school, it's a great way for me to socialise and meet other people.
Perfect, thank you. And Troy, what was joining your sport or your club like?
I was very nervous at first, starting swimming and thinking to myself, am I going to be good at it or am I not? And tackling the fear of deep water.
And once you had that first session, how did you feel then?
I felt like my nerves just went away all of a sudden. I felt like I tackled that fear of water and learning to swim. And I felt proud of myself. And my swimming instructor helped me in that.
I'm pleased to hear that. Fantastic. And B, what was joining your sport or club like?
For me, joining horse riding was really good because it allowed me to have a stress relief without having the pressure of having to fit in. And this is because it is accessible to almost everybody, no matter what type of background they might come from.
And you say horse riding is quite accessible. What about it do you think is accessible to everyone?
So when I started, I was at a riding school that was affiliated with the RDA. So it was accessible because they not only knew how to support me, but also lots of other people, as they had a lot of experience with working with a wide variety of different people and also different disabilities.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bea. And Troy, how did the coaches and staff help you when you told them that you were neurodiverse?
And they supported me and did one-to-one sessions to help with swimming and taught me everything I needed to know.
And why was that? Why were those one-to-one sessions helpful for you?
Because it allowed me to feel like I can learn in my own time and space. And I didn't feel rushed to learn the process of swimming.
Fantastic. Thank you, Troy. And Bea, what about you? How did the coaches and staff help you when you told them that you were neurodiverse?
So when I told them that I was neurodiverse, they always made sure that I had a quiet space, but also that they would help me if I needed help with something.
Fantastic. So they accommodated what you needed. Brilliant. Thank you, Bea. And Troy, did you feel welcomed when you joined swimming? What did the coaches or staff do to make you feel included?
Yes, I felt welcomed and they got me to go to the other pool sometimes to switch so I didn't feel alone.
And what's different about, you mentioned there are two pools. What's different about those two pools?
And what's different about it is one is shallow and the other goes a bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And the instructors encouraged me to move into the deeper pool to get me out of my comfort zone and push me, which I would never have done by myself. And I would have been too scared.
That sounds really positive, Troy. Well done. And Bea, what did you feel welcomed with horse riding, and what did the coaches or staff do to make you feel included?
I felt very welcomed as I was actually diagnosed with ASD whilst I already attended there. So it just enabled them to make sure that they were able to properly support me going forward by providing me with time to calm down and time away from other people, and just always made sure that I was okay.
And was there anything else that they did to help you feel included?
Well, I already knew the group, so I didn't need, so they didn't exclude me because I already knew them. But it just stays between me and my riding instructor because I don't want people to find out and then possibly treat me differently.
So it felt safe to tell them without them sharing that knowledge with everyone else. Perfect. Thank you, Bea. And Troy, what kind of things do the club or coaches do for you to make it easier to take part as an autistic person?
And first of all, checking if I was okay and letting me have time for space and time to calm down if something was challenging for me.
Perfect. And if you thought there was anything else that they could do to support you, do you think they would be able to do that for you?
No, I think they would have struggled with my needs and they would understand, but they might not be autism friendly. And their goal was mainly to teach me swimming and not to focus on my access needs and my disability.
So there's still a little bit of a barrier there. That's really useful to know, Troy. Thank you. And Bea, what about you? What kind of things do the club or coaches do to make it easier to take part with your autism?
So if people get quite loud and giddy, in particular during the half terms when the riding school horses get loaned out, although I'm put in charge of the children, if I do have a problem and I need something sorting out, then there is always an adult that will do that and also help me if they've upset me or if I need to go and sort something else out.
Perfect. And do you think you could ask not to have that responsibility to look after the younger children, or do you think you just have to do it?
So I think that I just have to get on I just have to get on with it. But if it is getting really, really overwhelming, then I am able to go and take a break.
Okay.
And
yeah. Sorry, B, did I interrupt you? I didn't mean to.
no, you didn't.
Perfect. Good. Right. Last question for you both then. So thank you very much. Troy, what kind of things do you find challenging about taking part in sport with neurodiversity?
Feeling like I will not fit in with my other peers and feeling like an outsider and finding rules of swimming really confusing and challenging to understand.
That's a really important point for us to bear in mind. So thank you, Troy. And B, what about you? What kind of things do you think are challenging about taking part in sport with neurodiversity?
For me, I've mainly struggled with the sometimes overwhelming aspect of sport, especially when it gets very loud or busy. But I also sometimes forget what times I need to be there. So in order to best support me, my lessons always get booked at the same time to make sure I can remember when to be there.
That's a really helpful accommodation. So I'm glad they're doing that for you. Fantastic. Well, I think those are all the questions that I had for you both. Thank you so much for answering them. I think what we're going to do is we're going to hand back to Laura. So thank you both so much for sharing your insights and your experiences. I know that everyone will have found that really helpful. And just a quick reminder that if you wanted to stick around, you're very welcome. But if you wanted to run away from all the boring adults, you are also very welcome to do that now as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you, B.
Thank you so much, Hope. And thank you, Troy and B. That was amazing. I'm so pleased that you're able to share so many positive experiences. Actually, that was really, really encouraging and sort of reassuring about how sometimes just making a small change can really make that difference. And something B just said at the end around just keeping something the same time, I think it's just something quite simple, but that can make such a real difference. But thanks so much, Hope, for sort of sharing that so well. That was brilliant. Okay, just what we wanted to bring in was just actually some of the practical tips we're going to share. Troy and B have already shared with us, but so Hope I'm just going to reinforce those as we go along. So it's really amazing that they've been able to do that and introduce some of these ideas. I guess it was just to bring into focus some of the safeguarding considerations and the difference that we can make by making some of these sort of small adaptations and considering the young person as a young person first and then disability second. So I'm just going to talk us through some of the things. So very boring, but research. The research does tell us that disabled children and young people are at increased risk of being abused compared with peers, and that they're also less likely to receive protection and support when they have been abused. Which really does emphasise the challenge for young people with disabilities and what they're experiencing. Research also tells us that professionals sometimes have difficulty identifying safeguarding concerns when they're working with deaf and disabled children as well. So there's this automatic barrier, and the research is telling us that it is more difficult for young people and they are at increased risk when they have a disability. And I guess some of the reasons why abuse may be overlooked, or professionals in particular may find it difficult to identify abuse, is that there are aspects of an individual's disability or needs that may make it harder for indicators of abuse to be recognised. I guess people can say, oh, that's, perhaps communication difficulty may be used to explain why something wasn't challenged, or perhaps I misunderstood it, those sorts of things, or perhaps behaviours, maybe just assume that they're linked to the disability rather than a change in behaviour is because of a reason that maybe that child is being harmed. So I think there's different reasons why things are overlooked, or why children with disabilities may be at increased risk of harm. So some of the challenges, definitely Troy and B have covered some of these off already, and I'm glad that these do align with what Troy and B's experiences have been. But some of the challenges for neurodiverse children and young people I've shared there on the screen. I think it's important to understand the challenges so we can start to think about the things that we can do to help those young people, or help us as professionals working with young people overcome some of those challenges. So it can be very difficult for children who are neurodiverse to express themselves. They may misunderstand the ways in which we're communicating. Therefore, we need to work harder to be able to ensure that they are able to understand what we're asking of them, and that we make that effort to really understand what they're trying to tell us as well. It might be that some of the young people with neurodiversity are more socially isolated, so have less contacts. Therefore, sharing something with a trusted person may be more difficult. In terms of special interests, we know some young people who are neurodiverse have special interests. That special interest could be sport. That's amazing, that having that commitment, dedication. But what we've seen in a sport context is that could lead to issues like overtraining, hyper focus on the sport, or fixation on the particular sport. So it's about recognizing that the sport might be the special interest, but also how can we ensure that the young people, that's not having a detrimental impact on that young person. There may be I guess, so some young people might not be able to understand that what's happening, or the behaviours that people are displaying are concerning. They might not recognise them as being wrong, I guess, to be able to escalate that as a concern. Behavioural challenges, I guess, this is the sort of thing that we tend to hear about at the Child Protection and Sport Unit, is when children are excluded from activities because their behaviour is deemed to be difficult. There's that concern around children not being able to concentrate in a session, being disruptive. We hear those sorts of things, and then parents and the child being asked to leave the club. So it's thinking around how can that activity be adapted to make sure that that children are accommodated where there are those behavioural challenges. And I guess there's this invisibility bit. It can be quite easy, I guess, sometimes for children to sort of just, because they might not be the most vocal in a group, there's that that possibility that they may not be as visible, and there's that lack of awareness around what the challenges are in having that, in having neurodiversity. Okay. And then there are barriers, and again, I think Troy and B mentioned some of these, but just, I won't read them all out, but just for you to be aware, a child at a younger age having a really negative experience in sport is going to have a detrimental impact on getting them back into sport later. So it's really important to have those positive experiences as early as possible. It could be finding the right club, finding the most appropriate activity that can cater and that is willing to sort of be patient and take the time to understand that specific young person's needs. There's often, there can be, certainly at club level, that lack of understanding and awareness of how to make something inclusive. It can feel like, especially we've got lots of young people in a group or in a session, how are you going to tailor it for everybody's needs? But actually what Troy and B have told us is there's some very minor things that could really make the difference, really, really minor adaptations to that activity that are easily achievable most at grassroots level. Again, similarly to that lack of opportunity for adaptation, Troy talked to us about different pools he's used, the patience around entering the deeper water, that sort of thing was really, really important. And I think those sorts of adaptations and considerations can make all the difference. And I think both Troy and Bea talked to us about the environment and how we can make that, you know, that busy environment, how can we make it less busy? How can we make this, you know, there's lots of things that can be done within an environment to make that a less busy session, a less loud session, a less bright session in terms of lighting and that sort of thing. So just thinking about some of those things. And I think there's a lack of awareness sometimes, certainly at grassroots level, around neurodiversity, what that means, and how do we upskill people to have the confidence really to welcome and encourage and make those adaptations. What we ultimately want to do and be advocating for is a really, you know, the easiest way to describe it is a meaningful experience for the young people, for all young people. And I guess there in that purple box, it's you don't need to understand every aspect of a person's specific disability, but you do need to be able to consider their particular needs. So what is it about their individual needs? And I think Troy and Bea both were able to demonstrate very easily to us how their needs were being met through the activities they were participating in. And I guess it's that bit around it might not be as big an adaptation as you're anticipating. So in terms of communication, just thinking about some of the ways of doing that, you know, I guess Troy and Bea are confident and we are really grateful for them sharing their experiences with us. Not all young people are going to be as willing, I guess, to share that with you. So we would just say, think about how you communicate with the children and families, take a lead from the young people. You know, what do they want? How do they think the session could be better for them? What changes would they like made to make them feel more included and better able to participate? And don't make assumptions, I guess. So, you know, what will be right for one young person with autism will absolutely not fit another. So it is that person-centred, young person-centred approach to this, what will help them specifically. And then think about the environment. I've just touched upon this. Can you practically make some changes? Quieter sessions, no music in some situations, less echoey spaces, overhead lighting, less participants. I know Bea shared with us, you know, when it's manic at half term during her sessions, that can be a challenge, you know, that sort of thing. Are there the opportunities for smaller groups, or are there times of the day when groups are smaller that young people might be better able to fit within that situation and experience, have a more positive experience? And then I guess just add some other considerations around broadening knowledge of neurodiversity, ADHD, autism, trying to get a better understanding of what of those sorts of conditions, what adaptations might work, to be able to better understand how you could support someone. And then I guess we get asked a lot about this at CPSU around disclosing that information, and that there's a fear from parents when they do share that their child is neurodiverse, about what that will mean in terms of inclusion at the club. Will they be allowed to participate? Will there be adequate adaptations made? But we would always encourage parents to share that, and for clubs to make that a welcoming experience so that people are encouraged, and that it's not seen as a oh, we need to know so we can make a decision about whether this child can join. It's we need to know so that we can make this activity the best it can be for that young person, really, and as inclusive as possible. And then just to sort of close at the end there with young person first and disability second. They are a young person first. Their individual needs are what they are, and the disability kind of comes secondary to that, helps inform some of your, you know, your response, but absolutely young person first.